Our next speaker will be J. Golden Barton. Mr. Barton was a friend and travel companion of Dr. Paul Chessman of Brigham Young University before Dr. Chessman's passing. Their travels took them far and wide in researching and authenticating finds around the world pertaining to ancient history. To even talk about a portion of the things Mr. Barton has been involved with would necessitate its own symposium. One of the places they did get to travel was in South America to visit with the Father Crespi in South America. Mr. Barton will be talking with us about the Father Crespi collection today.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, academics, scholars, students, explorers, adventurous, and fellow travelers. I appreciate this opportunity to discuss the Father Crespi collection of Cuenca, Ecuador. The late Dr. Paul R. Chessman, former director of Book of Mormon Studies at Brigham Young University, received a most unusual assignment, which he faithfully performed for many years during the 60s, 70s, and 80s of the past century. The first presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints received from time to time letters, manuscripts, telephone calls from various sources suggesting information as to the location of ancient records, artifacts, gold plates, etc., etc. The whole was turned over to Dr. Chessman to sift the wheat from the chaff. Apostle Mark E. Peterson was the liaison with church headquarters. On March the 5th, 1974, I was instructed by Dr. Chessman to pick up Elder Peterson in front of the church office building at 45 East South Temple in Salt Lake City. We had traveled less than a block when Elder Peterson inquired as to whether I had read Eric Van Daniken's book, Gold of the Gods. I replied that I had. And then he referred to the first chapter where Van Daniken claims he accompanied Juan Maritz to a subterranean chamber in the Amazon where a library of gold plates, or metal plates, I should say, of over 2,000 to 3,000 with ancient inscriptions were supposedly discovered. How much do you think it would cost to engage in such an expedition? Inquired Elder Peterson. I estimated a modest cost of between $5,000 and $10,000. And then he responded, we should do it. I traveled on to Provo, where we picked up Dr. Peterson and his lovely wife Millie, and proceeded to Sanpete County on other church business. I heard nothing more among my passengers as to the subterranean world of the Amazon. Dr. Chessman was an impressive individual with a keen intellect, a charismatic nature. We become good friends. He trusted me, and on a number of occasions we consulted and traveled together as he sought to fulfill his assignment from the first presidency. I laughingly suggested I was happy to be his valet for the privilege of just tagging along. I happily documented the events as he photographed and studied the various projects. He would introduce me as his research associate, and I was given complete access to all of his files. Such was our mutual trust. In August 1975, Dr. Chessman, myself, and two other friends, Newell Parkin and Wayne Hamby from the Salt Lake Valley, flew to Ecuador for the purpose of interviewing Juan Moritz. The appointment had been arranged by Dr. Chessman through Moritz's attorney, Matthias Pena. We arrived at the office of the attorney in Guayaquil at the appointed time on August the 18th, 1975. We were disappointed when Pena told us he had been able to reach Moritz, who was attending to his mining claims in the jungle. We had traveled a long distance to meet the phantom prospector. During our conversation with Dr. Pena, he gave us a history of his relationship with the elusive Moritz. He suggested that he could verify the claims of Mr. Moritz, having spent some 12 days with 6 other Ecuadorians in an exploration of the subterranean chamber. He said that a misdrop of food supplies brought their exploration to a short or an early end. He was unable to verify the metal library of 2,000 to 3,000 plates. Disappointed that we were unable to meet Mr. Ritz, Dr. Chessman informed us that he had an additional appointment that might help to confirm the veracity of the Amazon subterranean world of Juan Moritz. He had previously photographed what he described as an amazing collection of ancient artifacts in the custody of Father Crespi in the city of Cuenca, an hour's flight from Guayaquil, which we took. Now let's see, how do I push the spaces on? Just hit the button. Okay, thank you. Dr. Chessman had arranged us to meet the Catholic priest and view his antiquity collection. It is this collection that I have been asked to direct this presentation. High in the Andes Mountains of Ecuador lies beautiful Cuenca, a peaceful city with red Spanish tile roofs, worn cobblestone streets. Townspeople go about their daily business, happily trading with each other, and the native Indians who populate the hills and valleys surrounding the village. The Indians speak the tongue of their Quechua ancestors, who watched the sun rise over the Amazon hundreds of years before. With weathered and rosy cheeks, they radiate a simplicity of harmony with the rugged mountains where they have worked years beyond recall. The men of the tribe wear a single long braid of hair down their back underneath a Panamanian hat. Men, women, and children are dressed in the same black earth-tone cloth etched with bright-colored trim. The women are dressed in a more, I'm going to have to go back. I apologize. Can I go back? No, you're going the wrong way. You're going the wrong way. The women are dressed in a more colorful shawls, the blue and red, wear the same white Panamanian hat. Each shuffle the feet that carry them back and forth along paths long known by their ancestors. In the center of the city, the twin towers of the Church of Maria Alexandria stands above the entrance. The old church towers shelter melodious bells that ring in the dawn. Attached is the Catholic Secondary School of Salesiano. Young men and women of the more privileged class attend this school with classrooms that face a clay and terrazzo tiled courtyard. We entered through a slide door, found ourselves in a small open air enclosure facing stately hand-carved wooden doors. We had not waited long when a young friendly man bid us enter through the old wooden doors and ushered us into the private chamber to await Father Crespi. He at once recognized Dr. Chessman, the leader of our group, and extended an embrace of friendship. Paul appeared surprised at the greeting, as he did not suppose he would be remembered, as he had only visited the old padre some 6 years before. It did not surprise me. Few would forget a man with such a large, impressive stature as Dr. Paul R. Chessman. I expected an older, more feeble, and far more eccentric man. I judged that the old padre of 86 years was in excellent physical health. He possessed a keen, sharp intellect. On his wrinkled face he wore a kind smile. His robes betrayed a shaky hand. Some say he is senile. He certainly had all of his faculties on this day. I have since learned that he was a scholar with impressive academic credentials. Doctorates in anthropology, engineering, music. His list of accomplishments, long before we ever met him, is well known. At the end of his death, or his life, the Ecuadorian government awarded him the illustrious son of Cuenca. In 1982, at his death, Italy conferred the Medal of Merit of the Republic upon him. Indeed, his credentials are impeccable. We were unprepared for what was to come. Crespi took a large key from the ring that hung from a braided belt around his robe. He moved to an obscure wooden door and turned the lock. He and his helper disappeared into the dark room. They reappeared with a large piece of metal that had been molded and hammered into a long sheet. It appeared to be gold. The metal was inscribed with curious forms of artwork. I asked our good-natured leader to pose for a photo holding the plaque. Now, Paul was not one to do a lot of clowning, but I treasure this picture. The next object was a gold mask. Cameras began to click. For the next 3 hours, we photographed and examined the unique collection of artifacts. Metal plaques with unique symbols proved to be of great interest. A photograph made by Dr. Chessman of a metal plaque with inscription was forwarded to Dr. Barry Fell of Harvard University. On examining this plaque, Dr. Fell declared the writings were of Libyan Egyptian. He said, and this plaque has become known among scholars as the Massinissa plaque. The script announces the death of Massinissa, king of Liberian Egyptians, known to have died in the year 148 BC, and the ascension of his son to the throne of a united Egypt. Among the artifacts were numerous bronze pieces of metal with obvious Egyptian, Persian, and Old World art motif. Plates of various metallic compositions with unique inscriptions were brought from the room and photographed. Stone tablets with ancient inscriptions were also a part of the collection. The cameras clicked, the momentum accelerated as Father Crespi excitingly elucidated the story of his age-old treasures. Restraint was a little hard to maintain, as each of us stretched our necks and our eyebrows to see what would come next from the room. We crowded the doorway, venturing a few steps inside the unlit, dusty cobweb chamber, each of us hoping to catch a more circumspect view. We photographed the plates, and I might add, Father Crespi finally took his fingers and joined two bare wires together, turned on the light, and beckoned us to enter the room. This step pyramid and row of inscriptions was a metal plate that very much interested both Dr. Chessman and Barry Fell. Padre Crespi clearly understood our interest, finally yielded to an inspection of the room. Shelves of dusty, worn ceramics from forbidden yesteryears, starry-eyed idols of hideous stances, strange proportions, stacked from floor to ceiling, were hundreds of large cardboard pieces on which were wired metal bracelets, earrings, nose rings, necklaces, some untarnished by time. Hide scrapers, tools, implements of war, spears, axes, clubs of wood, metal, and stone were stacked everywhere. Father Crespi's mysterious room was overburdened with antiquity. The room was overflowing with objects from the forbidden past. Perhaps one of the most intriguing was the many plates of bronze, brass, silver, and gold. Many with strange inscription, hieroglyphic writing. Some were engraven with old world pictographs and symbols. Many were engraven and replete with engravings of animals, the elephant, the snake, the jaguar, wild beasts of every kind. Both the chariot and the horse were clearly etched into the metal. We spent the afternoon with Father Crespi, Dr. Paul Chessman, Newell Parkin, a banker from Bountiful, Wayne Hamby, an undergraduate student from Brigham Young University, and D. Craig Anderson, a Utah State University research associate and advisor in agriculture to the Ecuadorian government. He acted as our interpreter. In all my travels, this was to be one of the crowning experiences. I had never witnessed such an enormous and an amazing collection of artifacts. As I viewed Dr. Crespi's collection, my mind kept flashing back to the story of discovery of the subterranean world of Juan Maritz. Here they were, in front of me, plates, curios, antiquities, just as Maritz said were to be found in his subterranean world. I could touch, photograph, see them for myself. The artifacts, in our opinion, were real and genuine. This is the College of Salesian. This is inside, where the assistant of Dr. Crespi shows us additional metal plates. We asked the old priest how he came by such a marvelous collection. He told us he had been the parish priest for over 50 years, that he had studied at the University of Milan in Italy, where archaeology had caught his interest. Upon graduating, he became a priest, was assigned to the beautiful city of Cuenca to work among the Indian people whom he had grown to love. Here in Ecuador, he had ample opportunity to further his archaeological interests. To his great surprise and delight, the religious celebrations over which he presided brought a host of Indians, bearing gifts to the kindly priest who had attended them in baptism, marriage, trouble, and death. His collection began to grow, till after 50 years it filled many rooms. A museum was constructed to house the collection, but a few years previously it had been set afire from the act of an arsonist. He had salvaged 3 full rooms of the relics of the fire. One room of relatively obscure and unimportant tributes, one filled with items of curious antiquity, and the last room a treasury of gold artifacts and Incan pottery. Where and how do the Indians come by them, we ask? Oh, they get them from the jungle, from the caves and the subterranean chambers of the jungle, was his matter-of-fact reply. There are over 200 kilometers of tunnels, starting right here in Cuenca. They run from the mountains down to the eastern lowlands, near the Amazon. He had not sought fame nor fortune. He was living in a relatively isolated part of the world, high in the Andes Mountains, in an obscure village. Few travelers knew of his collection, even fewer scientists. He was a private person with a big heart and a deep intellectual interest in the past. Silver plates. Crespi, Newell Parkin, and D. Craig Anderson. At the end of the excursions, my thoughts again turned to Juan Maritz. his claim of a subterranean world. From the caves of the Amazon jungles and the highlands of the Andes, whispers the voice of an ancient people, long since buried, brought from the grave to the light of day because of a devoted Catholic priest who is loved by the Indians of his parish. Only as a side note, I believe that the case for elephants in the Americas past, as noted in the Book of Mormon, Ether 9, verse 19, has long since been proven by science. Nevertheless, if the pictures of elephant inscriptions on many of the Crespi plates and tablets are of concern to members of the audience, I take the liberty to present a photograph of a mastodon on display in the National Bank Museum in Quito, Ecuador. Having completed our day in the sun with Father Crespi, so to speak, I was left to ponder the question of Apostle Mark E. Peterson. How much would an expedition into the Amazon jungle to photograph the ancient library of metal plates cost? Did Juan Maritz have a subterranean chamber? Surely the Crespi collection and his knowledge of the Indians of Ecuador supported the necessity of furthering our contact with Juan Maritz. It would become, that day would come at another day and another time. But that is another story awaiting another presentation. Our contact with the Crespi collection did not end. In December 1975, under the direction of Dr. Chessman, who had been detained in Argentina on another project, I was asked to go to a meeting in which Juan Maritz did show. During that meeting, Mr. Maritz informed us of an expedition into the subterranean world that had been made by a British group of international explorers who were associated with the Royal Academy of Science. The president of the exploration was Neil Armstrong, the celebrated American astronaut. However, as predicted by Maritz, the exploration ended after mapping less than 100 miles of the cave's interior, and without discovery of the celebrated metal library. But as I have suggested before, that's another story for another day. After the meeting with Maritz, I accompanied several companions to Cuenca to view the Crespi collection for a second time. We were told upon arrival at the church that Crespi was dead and that the collection was no longer accessible. We subsequently learned that Crespi was in fact only deathly ill, but would recover and live for 3 more years. The curator of the local museum suggested that the government had intercepted a shipment of artifacts on their way to Rome. The situation was tense. At that very moment, as I was in Cuenca, Dr. Chessman was informed by Dr. Warren Cook of Castleton State College in Virginia that their appointment to photograph the collection had been canceled. We have since learned that Father Crespi was denied access to his collection from that date until the time of his death. The chronology is as follows. I am indebted to Dr. Warren Cook, the late Dr. Warren Cook of Castleton State University, And the Epigraphic Society, Volume 11, number 222, on December 1983, he published information as follows. In June 1981, Dr. Cook and Bruce Dexter, a photographer, gained access to Crespi. The 90-year-old priest eagerly told them, after he took them outside of the church, they have stolen my collection. Specialists were appointed to separate the wheat from the shaft. The collection was sold to the National Bank Museum, and two specialists, Dr. Gustavo Hermedia of Cuenca and Dr. Ulf Holm, director of the museum in the Banco Centro of Guayaquil, both archaeologists, went through the collection to sift the wheat from the shaft. Some 800 pieces of ceramics, 8,000 pieces of ceramics, including hundreds of truly superb examples, were transferred to the museum for catalog and display. They judged worthless all of the metal and rock artifacts, which made up the bulk of the collection, insisting that metal plaques with old world figures were only worth melting down. There was an obvious embarrassment of metallic objects, including the Chessman Fell Menesi plaque, the Chessman Fell Egyptian step pyramid, the Valentine Berlitz elephant stela, the silver and gold plates photographed by Chessman, Barton, Hamby, Anderson, and Parkin. We have the lights. This introduces one of the great weaknesses of Padre Carlos Crespi. His brilliant mind was only exceeded by his big heart. Throughout his 57 years as a parish priest, had become so attached to the poverty of the Indians that he knowingly gave a few pennies for each and every artifact brought to his attention. Soon the more interesting villagers were improvising bogus metal objects, counterfeit Spanish antiquities, even old world paintings of questionable origin. Did Crespi recognize their worthless value? It's my opinion that he did. I can attest to the fact that he kept a room filled with obvious fakes and bogus material. He showed us the room, but suggested there was no need to photograph any of the ramshackle collection. This brilliant man knew the difference between the genuine and the counterfeit. He simply could not resist giving his poverty-stricken congregation a little boost. However, it was this trait of kindness that fostered the decision to declare all of the metal counterfeit. 8 tons of the rocks, many beautiful inscriptions, were used as riffraff in the building of a road bridge. Plaques and artifacts rejected by the so-called experts were hauled off by people to places unknown. An attic room in the new school, built from the funds and the money received from the sale of the pottery, is known to house a few of the metal plates which were favored by Crespi. What happened to the gold is anyone's guess. Declared worth only to be melted down would suggest their fate. Today, the Ecuadorian project scene of Dr. Chessman has changed. President Spencer W. Kimball, Apostle Mark E. Peterson, Dr. Paul R. Chessman, Juan Maritz, Dr. Warren Cook, Padre Carlos Crespi have all passed on. I alone am left to ponder as I sit by the fireplace on a cold winter night, or feel the breeze on my cheek on a warm summer evening, left to ponder the subterranean world of the Amazon, where a library of 2,000 to 3,000 metal plates await their exposure to the explorers, the academics, and lettered men of science. Will we ever know? What I have seen, I have seen. And that which I believe, I will continue to believe. I leave each of you to discern for yourself the wonder of Padre Carlos Crespi and his rooms filled with ancient artifacts from the wondrous past. I thank you for your attention. Appreciate the Ancient Historical Researches Foundation's invitation to share my experiences with you. At another time, perhaps I will be invited to share the entire Juan Maritz intrigue with you. Thank you. I have an unpleasant duty. This is difficult. I am forced to bring up a subject of plagiarism. It is entitled, Stephen Schaeffer, Author or Fraud? The self-aggrandized best-selling author of Treasures of the Ancient, Recent Discoveries of Ancient Writings in North America, published by the Cedar Fort Press in 1996. I do not want to appear to be mean-spirited. Nevertheless, the time has come for me to publicly state that Mr. Stephen B. Schaeffer made a serious error when he published and claimed as his own material which he did not author. To add insult to injury, some of the facts referred to have been twisted, deliberately adjusted, and misrepresented to satisfy self-manufactured purposes and preconceived conclusions. The plagiarism of original ideas, phrases, historical outlines, conclusions, and graphs is a serious matter that cannot be countenanced in any manner, academic or otherwise. It is a falsehood that preys on the intelligence both of the publisher and the reader. Mr. Schaeffer has made a serious mistake in allowing himself to take credit for that which he did not write or originate. I estimate well over 60% or 70% of the chapters in this, the paragraphs, the sentences, the quotes, and all of the graphs in the back are mine. I personally authored over a period of 25 years in which I allowed him to copy for personal study. It was copyright material to which he was not giving my permission to publish. To attach his name to this manuscript was an abhorrent act which I greatly resent. May I suggest that Stephen Sheffer come forward, confess his mistake and his hypocrisy. He has reaped the final benefit, the financial benefits of this deed, but surely he knows in his heart and very soul the sting of filthy lucre. He has my forgiveness. Will it satisfy the need? He alone will know. The Ancient America Research Foundation is a no-spin zone. It will investigate any worthy claim to antiquity using reason, science, and honest, forthright evaluation. It will leave conjecture to others. It is dedicated to the revealing of truth, wherever and whenever it is found, irrespective of the source. Fraudulent claims will be exposed. It is believed that this approach best serves those who explore, dig, and investigate into the wondrous past. Thank you for your every consideration.